Hello, welcome to the Horti-Culturalists.
I'm Stephen Ryan.
You are, and I am Matthew Lucas, and we are crouching beneath this amazing leaf because we post every week. So do hit subscribe and follow our continuing adventures and hit the notification bell to know exactly what we're doing every week.
And we're going to talk this week about something where size seriously matters. This week we're talking about Gunnera.
And can I tell you that this has a special place in my heart, because as a child living in England, we used to go to the grand gardens, particularly in Cornwall, which are those temperate sort of subtropical gardens, and Gunnera was often a feature of them. And I remember as a little boy standing underneath these, what I thought was just giant rhubarb, thinking, oh my goodness, what an amazing plant. Yes. And here we are.
Yes.
I've grown up, although not completely.
No, you do have your childish side, I have to say. But Gunnera is one of those plants that entertains children of all ages. Everybody that sees this plant in my nursery for the first time wants to know about it. So,
and wants one. I do, but I don't have the space anyway.
Yeah, well, you know, space does matter when you're going to plant something like this. Now, Gunnera is a really interesting genus. Now, you mentioned the term rhubarb. They aren't rhubarbs for a start. They're commonly often sold as giant Chilean rhubarb.
Yes.
That's one of the common names they use for it.
And I've seen that common name
around. But they're not even vaguely related to rhubarb.
Really?
In fact, Gunnera is in its own family, the Gunneraceae. And
Gunneraceae.
Yes, and I think it was the Reverend Gunnerus, another one of those religious fanatics who collected plants.
He should have been tending their flock.
Exactly, and I think he passed away about 1780, something like that.
Oh, right, so 18th century.
Yep, so he had this genus named after him, which then meant, lucky him, he actually had a whole plant family named after him, because there's no other genera in this family, so it's Gunnera of Gunneraceae. So it is, you know, wow, how's that? I'd like to have a plant named after me like that. And it's a really interesting genus. It's mainly southern hemisphere.
Yep.
And it extends right the way across. There's a sort of an epicenter in South America.
Yes.
There's species in the Falklands, there's species in New Zealand, there's a species in Tasmania, and then it goes across to South Africa and Madagascar as well. So there's species in both those parts of the world.
However, I'm thinking that they don't all have this habit.
No. In fact, the genus has quite a lot of diversity in it.
Yes.
The biggest of them are the South American ones.
But we'll get to that diversity question in a minute, because you did show me something earlier, which I was very surprised by. But yes, so the largest ones are found in South America.
Yeah, and there's two main species.
Yep.
This one is Gunnera Tinctoria.
Tinctoria,
yes, as in used for tinctures, so
I was going
as
to
in
say.
dyeing and so forth. So it must have some use in that way.
Right.
The other one, which is very similar and often confused with this one, is Gunnera manicata.
Yeah.
And manicata actually can be even slightly bigger again. It has flatter leaves. Its flower spikes are more open with longer branches.
Yeah.
So the differences almost need to be seen together to understand how they are different. Most people get them confused. In Australia particularly, Tinctoria is the one that you'll see everywhere, and it's nearly always labelled as manicata.
There we go. Now we know.
There you go. So this is the biggest couple in the genus, and they go down rather dramatically from there to...
We'll get to its smaller cousin.
Oh, come on, I want to do the smaller cousin.
No, I just need to bask in the glory of this leaf. Now, it is massive. It's got a very rhinocerosy,
sandpapery
dinosaur texture.
Yeah, and the underside of the leaves have sort of blunt thorns on them.
Very spiky. So
as do the stems.
It's not a welcoming plant.
No, but it's not as vicious as one might think. I mean, I'd rather tangle with the Gunnera than tangle with the average rosebush. So there you go. So it looks more vicious than it is. And because of its common name, people assume edibility.
Yeah.
You know, because
giant
rhubarb. Yeah. And I, for years, didn't think it was. And so I used to say naff things when people say, oh, can you eat it? Which they invariably do. And I used to say, only if you're serving elephant's toenails as an entree. And then one day I had a Chilean lady in here, and she went, her ears must have pricked up when she heard me say something silly like that. And she said, but we do eat it in Chile. And so then my ears, of course, pricked up.
How?
Aha! Now, it's generally eaten by the children. It's not something that's part of a general dietary thing. And what they do is they pick a leaf stem when the leaves are really young, so when they first come up, and you peel it. So you take all of the rough, prickly skin off the outside of it, and then you get a bowl of salt, and you dip the leaf stem in salt, and then you eat it, so like celery.
Like celery, I was going to say, wow.
And I can tell you I've tried it.
Did it change your life? Are you a committed eater of Gunnera?
No, I have to say I'm not, because when I tasted it, it tasted exactly like salt.
There you go. Maybe try it without salt next time.
And then it'll have no flavour whatsoever.
So it's pointless. The whole thing is pointless.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Well, I think we need to take a closer look and talk about its life cycle, because this is fascinating.
All right.
And I can see a flower spike around there.
Yes.
Let's go and investigate.
All right. What a good idea. All right. Here is the flowering spike.
Right.
And this one is just opening up now.
Yes.
There's one that's finished flowering behind us here, which is a slightly greener one.
Is that all the seed coming off?
No, the seeds haven't actually formed on it yet. That's just the remnants of the flowers.
Oh, okay.
It will get little orange berries that will form on it.
Okay.
And some of our local birds love the berries. So that's what the flowering spike looks like. That's what it does. It doesn't do anything more overt than that.
Okay, so in relation to the flowering and its greater life cycle, it is a herbaceous perennial, is it not?
It is.
So all of this volume occurs annually?
Yes. And it collapses every winter down to the resting buds, which are down in there. So there's something that sits above ground level. It doesn't disappear underground, but all the foliage will die down. The flower heads will collapse and fall to the ground. And so the whole plant goes into a dormancy, and then as spring comes on, the whole thing just erupts. I can think of no better term for it than eruption.
And how fast does it go from zero to an opened leaf?
Around about 3 or 4 weeks.
Goodness me, that is so fast. And I would say, look, well, I'm 6 foot tall and it's probably twice my height.
Yeah. And the leaves have got to be, they've got to be 4 or 5 feet across.
Oh, it's the most extraordinary thing. So given it's a herbaceous perennial, what's its hardiness? I mean, you get light frosts up here. Is that what triggers it to die down?
Oh, yes. The cold weather will send the leaves into senescence, so they'll start to die.
Otherwise known as dying.
Yes. I like senescence. So the leaves will...
It's dead, Stephen.
Yeah,
dead.
Well, the leaves will collapse. Now, if you're in a frosty area, what you can do to protect your Gunnera for the winter is to then lift the dead leaves up, fold them over the crown of the plant, and then lay a great big chunk of wood or something on the top so that they don't move. And you've actually created a frost protecting layer.
Wow.
And as the spring comes on, you can either cut the leaves away, or it will actually basically push the dead leaves off.
Wow.
So if you're in a frosty area, fold the dead leaves over the plant for the winter. And I know that certainly in gardens I've been in the south of England, that's what they tend to do. They'll fold the leaves over the top of the plant.
Okay. Another question, is it ultimately forming a trunk? Is it going to get bigger, or is every year, once it's matured, is it always the same size?
It stays more or less the same height. It doesn't. Its trunks don't tend to get to any great height, but the clump itself can keep extending sideways.
Okay.
So you can end up with a huge colony like I have.
Yes, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 different crowns.
Yeah, but they all started as the one plant.
Right.
So it's all part of the one plant. This whole plant is probably less than a decade old.
Wow. Wow. That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is quite remarkable how quickly it grows under the right condition.
Now we're in your nursery and it is under shade cloth.
Yeah.
So is it an understory plant? Where does it grow naturally?
All right. Well, Gunnera Tinctoria and manicata are both swamp plants from parts of Chile.
Right.
So they extend from sort of central Chile probably right down into Patagonia.
Yep.
And they will be smaller growing in the more difficult climates as you go further south. So to grow them well, first, you must have a bog or a permanently damp spot.
And a bit of space.
Well, yeah, space is important as well, but I think that's almost obvious.
Yeah.
But you need a soil that stays really damp. The reason this plant is doing so well here at the nursery is that it's in nice, rich, sort of loamy soil.
Yeah.
And it's got sprinklers around it because the nursery gets watered by sprinklers every night during the summer.
Yeah.
So it keeps the root system really damp the whole year.
Because I was going to say, this is not particularly boggy or wet underfoot.
But it is where the Gunnera is growing.
Right.
It's very wet there. The water doesn't lay and go stagnant, so the water drains, but it's given water every night during the summer, so it's never, ever dry. It can grow on the edges of dams and ponds and things, but the problem we have in Australia is that the water level of our dams and ponds tends to go up and down.
Yeah.
And so in the middle of summer, it's often left high and dry, which it can't cope with. And in the winter, if you haven't planted it far enough back, it'll actually go underwater, which it doesn't really like either.
Ah, tricky.
Yeah, so you need to have a fairly constant water level if you're growing it around a pond.
Yeah.
Certainly its roots can get down into the water a certain distance once it's established, but it does not like being up where it's high and dry.
Okay. Good to know. Okay, so as we said, yours is under shade cloth.
Yes.
What is its light requirements?
All right. Now, it's not a matter of it needing shade or sun.
Oh.
What it actually needs is constant of either, if that makes sense. If you put it in sun, it will harden to the sun. It won't be quite as big, but it will harden up to the sun and it's fine.
Yeah.
If you keep it in permanent shade, it is fine. But if you put it somewhere where it gets a blast of hot sun for an hour in the middle of the day, it will burn and flag. So it needs to adjust either way.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Curious. There you are.
Yeah.
Now, we did notice down here one of last year's flower spikes, which has got, as you pointed out, little seeds germinating, which leads us to the natural question with all exotic species. Is it invasive? Is it weedy in any parts of the world, including here?
It'd certainly be weedy in some parts.
Yeah.
I can remember driving around Ireland, and any of you who are from Ireland will have also had the same experience. You're driving along with these beautiful verdant fields and stone walls and stone cottages, and you'll drive along the road and suddenly growing on a damp bank, a Gunnera.
Really?
And it looks so out of place. It just doesn't seem right.
It's gone wild in Ireland.
Yes, and I would imagine, it could possibly become weedy in Australia if there's a damp stream side somewhere where it's got permanent water flow, then it might well become weedy here. And I know that our weed officials in this country are in fact watching it like a hawk. I don't think it has actually been declared weedy as such, but it may have a minimal weediness in Australia. But certainly in damp climates like Ireland, yes, it could be quite an invasive plant and could be an issue to deal with.
There you go. Good to know.
Yes, exactly.
Now, you did allude at the beginning that it was quite a varied group.
Oh, yes.
Of size and form. What do I see before us?
Well, we've got the big one behind us, so that gives a sense of the biggest of the genus.
Extraordinary.
And here I have two of the tiny ones.
Now, let me hold this up closer, because this to me looked just like a geranium.
Yeah. Well,
But
it's not. It's a Gunnera.
And which type is this?
Well, that's Gunnera magellanica, which comes from the Magellan Straits. So
Yeah.
hence magellanica.
Yeah.
And the other one I've got here is Gunnera prorepens, which is one of the New Zealand species, and it gets little spikes of red berries, but is not one of the most showy of the genus.
No.
Quite like the leaf on that one, though, I have to say.
And why would you use these in
All
the
right.
garden?
If you had a bog garden,
Yeah.
probably a prerequisite to growing these things. But if you've got a bog garden, you often have these big, bulky plants in a bog garden. You have hostas
True,
and
and big
Gunneras.
strappy leaves.
Yeah, and all that sort of stuff. So these little Gunneras can make very, very pretty ground cover plants, sort of winding and welding their way through and between and what have you. So you could use them that way. Particularly magellanica, because it has one of the nicest foliages of the group.
Yeah.
Actually could make quite a nice pot plant in a broad, shallow pot sitting in a saucer of water too. So it could be just used as a foliage plant.
Yeah.
The berries on this other one are really pretty when it has the berries on it, which is in the late autumn.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make much of an impact most of the year.
And does this one flower or have berries as well? It's just a foliage plant.
This one, I think, is one of those that you need a boy and a girl to get. Some Gunneras
That
you need
old chestnut.
This one is self-pollinating, so prorepens produces berries without male and female. Gunnera manicata and Tinctoria are the same. But I've got a feeling magellanica is one where you need the boy and the girl to get the
To make magic
berries.
happen.
Yes, exactly.
Well, such an interesting and diverse group. I'm amazed. Amazed. There you go. Thank you, Stephen. I have longed to learn more about Gunnera because I've just always adored them, and this is one of the biggest ones I've seen in Australia.
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah.
I have to say. But it gets, actual neglect, but it gets all the water it needs, and that's all that seems to matter much.
Oh, it's just amazing. Well, heaven knows, how could we possibly top this?
Well, we won't top it, but we will do something different.
We have to wait till it dies down. You can't actually top it.
Yes, exactly.
But if you want to know what we're doing next week, do hit subscribe, because we post every week. And if you hit the notification bell, you'll know immediately of whatever brilliance we've decided to concoct.
Exactly.
So until then, we will see you next week.
Yes, goodbye all.